Hello and a warm welcome to another episode of Focus on This Week. This is a program that offers crucial and significant discussions in order to influence positive change and, of course, development in Tanzania, in Africa, and in the world at large. Leading the program, I am your host, Caroline Maleo, and of course, we'll be together on Wednesday at the same time and on the same day. Today on this program, we'll discuss a topic titled The United Nations Move to Nairobi, if it is a real East Africa's big break, or if it is a biggest test towards the East African region in the African continent. And actually, as we have actually recently heard, there has been rumors, stories that has been making on the headline that it is not yet to be confirmed, and we'll hear today if it is confirmed, that there will be a relocation by 2026 of some of the United Nations offices, including the UN Women, UNFPA, and UNICEF to Kenya, where these offices will shift there. So today we will look into this story. If this is really going to be a reality, will it be something that will bring will recognize Africa's contribution in the diplomatic world? And actually, to dive deep into this topic, we are joined by Susan Ngongi Mondo, who is the United Nations Resident Coordinator in Tanzania. You're mostly welcome. Thank you. But I can proudly say I was was the first Tanzanian journalist to interview her when she got to office. You're mostly welcome.
Thank you.
But we're also joined with Dr. Hildebrand Shayo, who is an economic analyst, but also he wrote an article that I got time to read regarding the topic. You're mostly welcome.
Well, thank you.
And now, before we dive deeper into the topic, let's hear from you. They say women first. So we want to hear from you, Susan Namondo, Your Excellency. Can you tell us, are these rumors true? Is it true that the United Nations wants to relocate some of its officers to Kenya and to some other African countries?
No, there's some truth there. So as many people know, this is a time of change. The Secretary General launched a reform agenda, the UN at 80, it's our 80th birthday, this October, and looking at how to make the United Nations more able to serve its clients, which are the nations of the world, in this 21st century. And among that, part of it also is looking at greater efficiencies, how to make the UN more efficient. And within that scope of efficiencies is to see how we can better utilize the UN's assets globally. Now, the UN has 4 HQ locations: New York and Geneva, Vienna, and Nairobi. Nairobi is an HQ location for the United Nations.
Oh, it is also an HQ location?
Yes, it hosts 2 agencies, UNEP and Habitat. The HQs are in Nairobi, but not only. It hosts significant secretariat entities. It's a major hub for the United Nations, and it's the main hub for the United Nations in Africa. So as part of UN at 80, there are 3 different strands. I can talk about that. One of them is really about efficiencies. And part of the efficiencies is how to better bring offices closer together and develop these hubs so we can better serve, so to speak. And among that is to move some HQ entities, offices, etc., to Nairobi. But let me clarify, for UNICEF, for UNFPA, and for UN Women, their political center, their HQs remain New York. But some offices will be relocated to Nairobi. They still retain their global service function. Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much. You explained about efficiency. That's why there has been that relocation to Kenya, to some of the African countries. Of those offices. Yes. But the headquarters still remains.
The headquarters still remains
in New York. Going to you, Dr. Hildebrand Shayo, I have a question. Do you think that this relocation could have still been done if there weren't, there has been rumors going on, and actually we could see with the leadership of Donald Trump in power, that he cut funds on UN AIDS and on international AIDS programs. Do you think that this relocation would have still been done to Kenya if such things wouldn't be happening?
Well, according to the Secretary General of the United Nations, he thinks on his framework that he came up with on issue of cost saving because of global changes that are happening. Countries have got different needs. So he wanted this, if I might give my opinion, he wanted this to relocate some of the offices, as it has been said, to strategically to be closer to where the beneficiaries are. So whether Donald Trump, the President of the United States of America, was not going to cut some of the funding, because we all know America contributes significantly to the UN operations because of the economic size and historically. So Donald Trump policy on cutting costs and seeing some of these offices that, well, they can run more efficiently. I think Kenya, given its historical location and given its designation, as it has been said, it's one of the 4 UN areas where they can have their offices, still it will have been in Kenya. The issue is, because of the historical of these other UN offices, Kenya strategically already has infrastructure which give Kenya advantage of having more of some of the offices that will relocate part of their functions into Kenya. So it will have been very, very difficult for other countries within the region or in Africa to have that opportunity to host these offices without proper preparation. What I mean is that given global changes, these African countries, the like of South Africa, the like of Rwanda, the like of Botswana, and the like of Tanzania, for example, they need to make sure they have in place a plan that can appeal to the United Nations. If they want to relocate some of their offices to these countries, they may consider, because there are a lot of things which they have to look at. There is security issues. There is, if anything happens, there is issues of evacuation according to the international standards. When you have the foreigners working in a particular country, you have to have a system to make sure that if anything happens, you are able to collect or to put the people in place. That's why here, when there is a war in a country X, Y, you will hear a particular country is collecting or taking out its citizens. So for the UN, as members of such big organization, Kenya has got that advantage.
Okay, yeah. Okay, Dr. Hildebrand, thank you for that explanation that you have provided. Given the advantages that Kenya have, and actually you mentioned other countries that they can tap into this opportunity, if for the people that do not understand the benefits that a country can get for being a host country of these United Nations offices, what benefits does a country benefit from having these offices in their country?
There can be significant benefits. I think depending on the organization, depending on the relationship, there is a greater visibility of the country within that particular multilateral system. There can be benefits of jobs, for instance, depending on the size. Other economic benefits, because of course when you have a lot of UN staff members, they need housing, they need schooling, they need healthcare, and they can contribute positively to the economy. But of course there are great responsibilities as well. Kenya has been mentioned. Kenya is an HQ location designated since 1996. There's significant infrastructure. Kenya also has supported the United Nations significantly in terms of facilitating its presence there. So there are benefits, but there are also responsibilities. And of course, and has been mentioned by Dr. Hildebrand, the world is changing. I think we do have a generation of opportunity, so to speak, to try and refashion these global multilateral institutions in a way that can better service member states today. And so there's an opportunity to start thinking about, okay, so where are they placed? How are they contributing significantly to the development? how we place it, because they're global institutions. They're not just for the country or for Africa. How can our countries be better placed to host them, to service the global agenda, etc.? So I think there's an opportunity, and our country should be thinking more about it. Of course, there's a process. It's for our member states to agree. So if Tanzania wanted to become a significant place hub for UN agencies, I think it would help for Tanzania to convince member states why it should be this major place. There are huge advantages here, the peace, the security, etc. But member states more broadly would need to be convinced and how it serves the global good.
We'll come back to that on how Tanzania can be able to host these member countries. Now to you, Dr. Hildebrand Shayo. I read your article and I saw a lot of economic, social, diplomatic benefits that a country will get by being a host country. Give us those benefits that I might think that some people do not
as
understand.
my colleague has just said, you can break this benefit into 3 categories. You could have economic benefits, you could have diplomatic relationship benefits, as she said, but you could have developmental benefits. Now, looking at the position where an UN, part of the UN office is hosted, let's say, in a country X. Look at the real estate. There will be a lot of benefits because of the demand for staff who will be working in that particular country. Look at the travel agencies. There will be a lot of procurement that will involve people, staffs that will be moving in and out. Look at the issue of security companies, because there is an issue of making sure that these employees are being well looked after for security reasons. There is the issue of the tourism, because when their families, or when they break off for a break, let's say for a brief holiday, they might have to go to visit, let's say, tourist attraction. For Tanzania, in this case, we have Zanzibar, we have Mikumi, we have Kilimanjaro, although climate Kilimanjaro, you need exercise. But you also have Serengeti and the other national attractions. But also you have the opportunity of improving infrastructure, because you need to make sure that the road construction, for example, the street light, these are small things that will appeal to make sure that people are employed. Now, to have all these things, because you say a normal person might not understand what are the benefits a country might get when you have, let's say, UNFPA office in Dar es Salaam. There are people who will be working in that particular office. Now, there is the issue of the culture of working. Those are the benefits, because we as Tanzanians, we have a way of doing things. But when you have an international organization operating in your country, there is that learning process. You learn from them.
And Dr. Hildebrand, yes. From there, with what you just explained, if the officers will come, then people will be able to get the jobs. Does it mean that when the office moves, the ones who are already working in that office will move out? And
No. Maybe she will be able to tell us better, but as far as I know, when these big offices, the international offices move, there is a certain portion of types of jobs that has to be generated locally. Now, these people will be able to improve their family, their well-being. They will be able to have income to take their kids to school. They will be able to, to improve their well-being. But also there is the issue of improvement for schools, because the experts who comes in, they might, because if they have got small kids, for example, they need to have a proper school. There is the issue of the hospital in case someone gets sick. So in one way or another, they help the local hosting country to improve their services, to be of a certain standard that can be accepted, that if someone is transferred from, let's say, from New York, you are now told that you'll be going to Nairobi. There are those family issues that you will be looking at. Am I going to get proper treatment if I become sick? Or will my kids be able to go to school? Because you cannot be relocated, and unless you have a kids for 5, 6, 7 years, you are in Dar es Salaam, you are in Nairobi, and the kids are studying somewhere away from you because of the parental and the family issues. But now look at it, indirect benefits now, through the value chains. These people need to eat. So a farmer who is in Iringa, for example, or a farmer who is in Kisumu, or a fisherman who is in Mombasa is fishing fish that found its own way to the supermarkets or to the hotels or the restaurants, where these people will be having time to go and dinner or enjoy food. So you are creating employment. So this benefit might not be seen openly, but when you sit down and start counting them, you find there's a lot of benefits that can go to a host country. But as she said, people might think when you have an international office in your country, they look at the bigger picture. But look at the small things that can be of very, very useful and beneficial for the people in that particular hosting country.
Dr. Hildebrand, you explained a lot of advantages that a host country actually gets by having the UN offices. Now, if there are all these advantages, where is Tanzania? Have we really started to tackle this opportunity? Or when are we going to start to apply to have these offices in our country to be able to get all these advantages?
Well, it depends. So, of course, it's for the politicians to see if this is a direction that might be good for the country to take. And, of course, if the politicians determine that it might be useful to host, be a better host for UN offices, then for me, the first place to start is political. The argument has to be made of why Tanzania. And if that argument is made, it's then for the country to sort of sell why Tanzania is good to host this global presence. Maybe to start regionally, it makes sense. That could be a pattern to host regional offices. And then once there's a concentration of regional offices, to then make an argument of, okay, then now we should be hosting global offices. And of course, these things take time, in my view. So if the politicians deemed it useful, then we could have a plan of 5 to 10 years of how to really raise that profile for Tanzania as a hub for UN offices. And of course, Tanzania offers lots of advantages. It's the gateway to Southern Africa, to Central Africa, to East Africa. We have improving infrastructure, etc. So the case can be made. But our politicians, we need to determine if this is a path that is worth pursuing for the broader development of the country.
Thank you so much, Her Excellency. You mentioned the politicians, the policymakers. Dr. Hildebrand, who is going to tell our politicians about these benefits, these advantages that we need to tackle on?
Well, the question of our politicians depends on which political background these politicians are coming from. If you have a political environment where you have candidates within the political sphere who sees these benefits in a bigger picture, they can, through their policies or through their framework or through the things they believe can change this country moving forward, including being a host of this international organization. And in fact, for Tanzania, this is the right time, for example. Soon we are going to have election. We could be hearing from the politicians. What is their plan to make this country more safer? We are, as she said, regionally, we are more stable because you have the peace, we have been having a transition peacefully, and someone comes, someone goes. The issue is, how do we plan our things? The 2050 Tanzania Development Vision, I'm sure it has taken into account because of the relocation to Dodoma. There are some certain things, if you read, I don't know if you have happened to read the big document. There was a location set aside in Dodoma, if I remember, for the international organizations. So this perhaps could be a right time to see, infrastructure-wise, what do we need to have in place to ensure we manage to convince the international and the Secretary General Assembly to see there is a need to have some of these offices to Tanzania. But as she said, there is a lot to be done. It's not something you wake up in the morning and then tomorrow start crying that I can see more offices. Kenya has got 23 offices right now, and now 3 are moving in. They're going to be 25. You cannot start crying that why Kenya is being preferred. There was a process from 1996 when it was designated. So they have been building up every time and then to put infrastructure in place, despite other social, political issues that may be happening within a particular country. But still, there is that assurance that if anything happens, we know our people who are working on behalf of the rest of the world are safe, their well-being are looked after, and things like that. So for Tanzania, yeah, we have a long way to go, but we need to start thinking strategically, because I'm here today, I will go. Someone will come, will go. But the country remains. So how do we plan? How do we strategically align our vision, our policies, and long-term thinking to be able to convince the international organization, not necessarily the UN. There could be other private companies, multinational companies, who wants to have their offices in Tanzania because of this centrality, because of this position located in Tanzania to save at least 5 or 6 landlocked countries, strategically for business, for trade. That could attract international companies. Because when this company comes, you should also not forget there is the issue of flow of currency. There's hard currency. When you have the UN, the money comes through the bank. So when the money comes through the bank, let's say dollar, pound, yen, or whatever, it boosts the financial services of the country. So you need to have people who can think strategically and not have politicians who only want to fit their own interest, not the interest of the nation for the future of that particular country.
Indeed, we need politicians who will think for the interest
of the
nation.
Yes.
Dear TVC1 viewers, if you're just tuning on the channel right now, the program on the air is Focus on This Week. And today we are discussing about the United Nations decision to shift some of its offices to African countries and, of course, to Kenya, where we see that UNAIDS, UNICEF, and UNFPA will be shifting to Kenya. And here at the studio, we're joined with the United Nations Resident Coordinator, Susan Gongi-Namondo, but also with Dr. Hildebrand Shayo, where we are actually diving deeper into this topic. Now let's talk about something else. What? There are critics that are saying that maybe the shift of the United Nations offices to African countries might bring direct control into Africa's leadership and government. How is that? Can you explain? Should the fear be there, or?
I think it's misplaced. I think people who say things like that don't understand how the United Nations works. We're an intergovernmental organization that works at different levels. There are political processes in place, mostly happens in New York. Most of us present in agencies, working in countries, have an operational role, and most of that is working with the government to support them in implementing their development agendas, usually in line with globally agreed goals. So right now we're focused on the Sustainable Development Goals, but it's really working to support the implementation of the national agenda, which is in alignment with those global goals. So it's hard to see how we would have the opportunity of meddling, so to speak. That is not the role that we play.
Thank you so much. Dr. Hildebrand, do you have anything to add?
Well, yeah, when you have the international organizations, part of the international organization, not necessarily, even the private sector, or when you have foreign companies operating in particular countries, we need to accept the reality on the ground. You don't expect to have everything to be positive. There could be some impact, or there could be some negative effect of having these institutions.
What are those?
Because some of the institutions, they will come with their culture of the way they work. That's number one, which may affect. For example, in our case, you have their offices from Monday to Friday. You have asked for, let's say, for off 3, 4, 5 times. When you are working for an international organization, you should have to put yourself in a situation, you have to work. These other excuses might not be of any use. So it's a mindset, that culture. That's one. But two, when you have, because you said, is there a need for us to fear when you have international organization? benefits are more compared to the small fears that make, because it's also depending how the host country receive this international organization. As she said, there are limits. They have a parameter that's on this intervention, we can only go up to this level. For example, there is a political party A and a political party B, they are fighting. You won't hear the United Nations interfering because they know their mandate. They know their limits. They are there to save the interests of the international based on their mandate. So that fear could be there, but maybe it's for people who don't understand how the UN operates.
And I think fundamentally, if you're being hosted, if for whatever reason the host is unhappy with your behavior, the host can always terminate the hosting facilitation. Indeed.
So how does the United Nations now maintain the cultural integration? As Dr. Hildebrand had said, there is a different culture, maybe in workplaces.
In terms of the workplace, that we always, when we hire people into the United Nations, our expectation is that the way of work will be that of the United Nations, right? So, for instance, within our offices, there are norms that we expect to be followed. We expect great efficiency. We expect people there at certain times of the day. We expect particular ways of working. You know, it's collaborative, it's open, it's transparent.
Teamwork.
Blah-de-dee, blah-da-da, yes, teamwork, etc. That's an expectation, but I don't think these ways of work are not violating Tanzanian norms that I'm aware of. There's no abuse and things like that. So I think that's mostly positive, isn't it?
Yeah.
I don't see that as negative. So yes, but all of these things are always mediation, right? Mediation. So we work, we have to be sensitive to our African norms when we are in Africa. So as our offices are in Asia, they would have to be sensitive to Asian norms. Offices that are working in North America would have to be sensitive to North American norms. So it's a process of finding ways that are productive. But generally, I don't think these are issues for huge debate. I think your question, when you had asked it, was more sort of meddling in a political manner. Yes.
Okay, thank you so much for that explanation. And let's talk about, let's go back to the shift of the UN offices to countries like Kenya. We can see that the offices that are shifted includes UN Women, UNICEF, UNFPA. Do this signal that the global agenda in Africa that is more centered on children and on women, that is why these offices are shifting to Kenya?
That's not my understanding, because Kenya already, through the campus in Gugiri, hosts a broad number of UN agencies and entities, including significant entities that work with the Secretariat. So I think there already are regional offices of UN Women, UNICEF, and UNFPA in Kenya, significant offices. I see this as the offices globally finding that they can shift some functions to Kenya and still serve the global, serve the globe well from Kenya. And I see it more as an efficiency measure as opposed to anything else.
Thank you so much, Susan.
Maybe to add on what she has just said, because as you say, Kenya, is it Gigiri?
Gigiri, yes.
Gigiri. Already the infrastructure is in place.
Yes.
So when I speak of infrastructure, is the UN system. They have the way of...
It's a massive campus.
Massive campus. So having that advantage, is for them to have a module to increase another function of a particular office, it becomes easier to manage and to handle, because already the space has already been provided, unlike in other places where you'll be starting from scratch. I remember Tanzania, we used to have the UN, something to do with the court in Arusha during the Burundi peace negotiation. Maybe that would have been a source and a better opportunity for Tanzania to start telling the world or the United Nations that, look here, on this particular aspect, we can manage this aspect of the UN or international organization on this particular issues of mitigation and things to do with those who are involved in a criminal at the international level. The one that moved to The Hague. Is it The Hague?
Yes.
The Hague.
Indeed.
So the kind of Arusha infrastructure could have been the beginning of this journey for Tanzania to start attracting more part of the offices, be it private, big multi-corporation companies, or being some of the UN offices. Now, what is happening in Arusha at the moment, I can't talk it here because it's not part of this discussion, but yeah, opportunity has been there. And Tanzania proved beyond the well that things could be done from Tanzania, and there was no problem, and everything went well, and the countries are now in peace.
Dr. Hildebrand, thank you for that explanation. But let me go back to Your Excellency, Susan Namondo. I understood clearly what you explained when I asked the question of why the offices are put in Kenya specifically. But when we look at UNICEF, it deals with child protection, child safeguarding. When we look into UNFPA, population, reproductive health, when we look into UN women's rights, empowerment. But this makes me think, do you think that in our continent, in Africa, these are the main or the core challenges that the African continent we are facing, especially actually in the East African continent, in the region?
No, but when you look at Kenya also, you have UNEP, which deals with environment. The whole HQ is there. You have UN Habitat, which deals with sustainable settlement. You have UNODC, which deals with drugs and crime. You have the full, broad range of UN offices present in Kenya. So, in addition, you already have regional offices of UNICEF, UN Women, UNFPA, etc. So to have HQ entity, parts of the HQ that are also operating in Kenya, I don't see that as an aberration. I don't see it as a statement of, okay, we are going to focus on these things in Africa. Remember, these are HQ entities, right? They deal with the entire globe. Yes.
Okay.
I don't think it's a particular statement on Africa, is the point I'm trying to make.
Thank you so much. And how does this relocation fit with the African Union Agenda 2063, the East African protocols, the Tanzania's our own recently launched foreign policy? How do they align to that?
I think the way that we can say it aligns is all of the work that the United Nations is doing now is geared towards supporting countries to reach those sustainable development goals. And those sustainable development goals are very aligned with Agenda 2063. So if somehow these offices being in Nairobi makes them more efficient, can have better impact in terms of servicing member states, then it helps us better also implement and support Agenda 2063.
Thank you so much. To you, Dr. Hildebrand Ashayo, can you tell us now if this move happens and Tanzania maybe will be able to become a host country, let's say, and other African countries that are applying to become host countries, if this happens, how do we ensure that the move strengthens and does not disrupt the regional's unity, but actually ensures that we achieve the goals that we have in the region?
Well, countries in Africa, especially in the global south, the way they call it these days, they have their specific missions, they have their specific visions for their development of their countries. So when this international organization relocates to some, as you said, other countries that might be putting their infrastructure, or they might be putting their country in a position where they could appeal to the UN to see, okay, we can even locate this part to this particular place. There will be, as she already said at the beginning, there will be a demarcations of the roles and responsibilities. So which, to me, I think if that is made clear from the beginning, there won't be interactions that might end up causing misunderstanding. I won't call it conflict, misunderstanding, because of fear that having a UN office in a particular country might allow them to interfere the local setting, the local thinking, the local politics, or might influence. But since these things are led by frameworks, by regulations, by well-structured guidelines, there won't be a problem. The issue that I think for these countries to be able to appeal is for them to have in place a plan. And as you said, this could be a long-term plan, that you don't wake up in the morning and having this office tomorrow. You need to be able to demonstrate and to make sure that those who are doing assessment, because there will be an assessment. They didn't start to give Kenya the 1996 that status among the 4 zones in the world to have their offices located. There was an assessment done. So when such assessment is done, it has to make sure that all the ingredients that fits the standards that they want to take care of, they are all met. And that will give the country like Tanzania a position to be able to, through our foreign offices, because these are work done by the foreign ministers, to make sure that they interact well, they lobby well, because you don't sit inside and then you think these things will come by themselves. There is also an aspect of lobbying to try to convince the big boys that, look, we can do this. This is our plan. So for us, as you are moving to Dodoma, if you have a bigger place, tell them that this can be a UN kind of a complex in future. They could even help us to design how you can place those infrastructure to fit into the standards they want to keep.
And Dr. Hildebrand, I read your article.
Yes.
And at the end of the article, there were things that you said. Can you kindly tell us what transformations do we need?
Well, for the UN's offices to relocate to this part of activities, there are certain things they look at. They look at the rule of the law. But for us, Tanzania, we are good at that. They look at the freedom of press, how the freedom of press is taken care of in the country. These are small things, but they matter a lot. For us, you know, we have a freedom of press. And for ARA, things are moving softly. They look at the security-wise. If you look at the East Africa, we are the most peaceful nation. There are problems here and there, because a society that does not have problems here and there, that is, they call it a dead society. So yeah, because of different perspectives, different views, you will find there's misunderstanding here and there. But generally, we are a peaceful country. We are strategically located, meaning we are saving other landlocked countries. Now, all of this, we need to make sure that if we talk of our financial institutions, the way they can allow money to come in for the institutions that might be attracted to come here, they don't have a problem with the transfer of the money. So only if the money is clean, because, you know, when you start transferring a lot of money, it might end up having a problem. But the financial institutions should be in a position that they can allow the facilitate the transaction, for example, for payment and things like that. They also need to have the standards. So those are the things, among other things I mentioned in my thinking around on what country like Tanzania need to do. And the other countries that are looking forward in future to host this international, part of the international organization, what they need to do in their domestic countries to appeal to the international organizations, and they will say, okay, we can relocate part of, because the international organizations have got so many activities that they are covering globally. You have those who are dealing with the refugees, those who are dealing with those who migrated from one place to another. And for example, there was the issue of one country taking refugees or a legal migrant to another country. You know, these are the kind of things, there should be a clear understanding. So to me, if you can have a proper structured, that one can see there is a future, then the country X, country Y, country B can appeal to those who decide to say, now we are locating this part of the function to this particular country. We can be part of, but it's a journey.
It's a journey, indeed.
It's a journey. It's a journey.
Now let's go back to Susan Namondo.
Yes.
Susan, can you tell us Does this relocation to Kenya really signals that East Africa is ready to act as a diplomatic hub to the United Nations offices? And should we expect now other parts of the continent rushing into this opportunity?
I think we are in a moment of change.
Yeah.
It's a moment of change. Geopolitically, things are happening. Within that change also is a moment for rethinking this United Nations that we have. How can it better service its member states? Within that, I think there's an opportunity also to look at, okay, so who is where, these different offices. So that should be explored. And I think while each country should be doing some of its own thinking, when we talked earlier, I said our politicians will need to sit down and see if this is something that fits in the country. My hope is that we also don't do it alone. So I think each country should think, but then maybe it should be an East African discussion and then a continental Africa discussion also, so that it is clear how it fits on our sort of continental agenda to be able to host these countries. Because it would not help if then we have different countries who are sort of vying for these things themselves. There should be a discussion. Huh? Let East Africa agree how it wants to approach this. That would be helpful. But then maybe Africa agree how it wants to approach it. That would be even more helpful. In my view, anyways, I think that would be a lot more productive than, as you say, that we're vying for these things. Among ourselves, we should figure it out.
It is true because, for example, we have got the AFCON 2037.
Yes.
It has been hosted by how many countries?
3 countries.
3 countries. You see, that's the beginning, that things can be done in a coordinated manner. So if you can start from the sport, maybe you could go to another level.
For me, that would be helpful.
Yeah. So that will signals that East Africa can be a hub, slowly, but building those structures to make sure that everything is in place as planned.
And the more coordinated and united we are, the better then to convince globally that this is a direction that perhaps we should take.
Indeed, the regional's role and the East African community's role. Now, let's hear from you, Susan. Can you tell us how is the United Nations working with Tanzania's government to support its development vision and actually to attain a vision like the one that you just explained, that we need a regional and East African coordination?
Well, in terms of how we would largely, actually, our focus in Tanzania has been Tanzania as opposed to the region. The way that we do work, we have a program of work that we sign with the government, a 5-year program of work. Usually how that works is we look at the, Tanzania's development plan, where Tanzania wants to go, and we try and identify areas that we think the UN can be helpful in supporting the government. And overall, I should say that we're very excited about DIRA 2050. Because it's really a clear direction of where Tanzania wants to go by 2050. And so now part of our job is to really interrogate that document to see which areas we think we can be helpful. And of course, we also count on the government giving us some guidance on which area they think the UN can be helpful to really reach those goals. As the UN, I think we should largely be seen as technical support. For those of us in country, that's where we can really add some value. It's really on the technical side of things, how to, and bring some global experience to enrich Tanzania's own experience in terms of implementation of those programs.
And how does the United Nations support development projects? Because you said you were supporting. How do you do it?
How? So it's looking at, so on the policy side of things, what are some of the policies that might need to come up? We help policy-wise. Then there's the program, so how do you implement? Technical agencies like the UNICEF, the UN Women, etc., can come in and look at the program and see what can be done. And then there's sometimes a little bit of money that also gets transited through the United Nations to the country. So the United Nations doesn't make any money of its own. We're not a government. We cannot leave you taxes. We don't have, it's all through contributions, and most of it through voluntary contributions. Some of it is assessed, but most of it is voluntary contributions from member states and people at large who put money for Tanzania's development, but they channel it through us. So that's how we help. Indeed,
I definitely hope that Tanzanians are actually are able to learn what the United Nations are working to support the government of Tanzania. Now to you, Dr. Hildebrand Shire. Can you tell us, in one word, what do you think the United Nations relocation, can you just sum up the United Nations relocation to the continent and to some of the African countries? Anything that you want to say about it?
Well, for these countries within the Global South, I mean sub-Saharan Africa countries, and within our region, we need to align our vision with the UN core values. That's number one. Because through that, if a country XYZ is aligning its plan with the UN core values, then the UN can see, okay, if we transfer part of our function to this particular country, given there is infrastructure that can support the activities, then definitely whoever will be transferred, or that function that will be transferred, will be able to fulfill its role and duties to save the world. And that could have a lot of huge multiplier effect to a host country like Tanzania. That's the only thing we need to do. But the important thing is to have the focus, to have the plan, because without that plan, that can give you that journey that you will take to be able to appeal to the United Nations, for them to think we will be safe to have our part of our offices, not part of our offices in Tanzania. Because already we had some offices here. UNHCR, there was a time when we had the problems within the western part of this country. There was a huge presence of the UN staffs dealing with the issues of refugee here. And now the issues of the genocide that were held in Arusha. So for me, opportunities are there. The issue is, how do we convince our leaders to see that bigger picture? Because as I said, as she said at the beginning, it's not something you just woke up. It's a process, it's a plan that needs to appeal to both international organization, but also the politicians, to see there is something that can benefit the people of the particular country, and in this case, for Tanzania.
Thank you so much for that explanation. Susan, do you have anything that you want to add? Anything that you want to talk to the Tanzanians, into the East African region, and to the whole of Africa?
I think it's good that you're having this discussion.
Yeah.
One, first and foremost, it's a moment of change. Yeah. The UN is a multilateral platform, quite frankly. And I think all Tanzanians should know more about the United Nations, know how it works, know how it can be influenced, because in this moment of change, we're looking to see how we can tweak it so that it better serves. So it helps if people know about it, right? The politicians of the UN are governments. They're the ones who all sit together and make decisions about which way we should go. And all Tanzanians should be able to contribute to that process. So now, in part of specifically for this discussion, it was this move, offices moving, etc. So it's a moment of some opportunity. Let's sit down and look at it. Let Tanzanian politicians see if this is something that might be useful. If it is useful, of course, we can plan on how to make the country one that is a greater hub for UN activities. Perhaps start regionally and then go globally, but that can be planned out and see if it is of benefit. But generally for me it's a moment of opportunity. We should be discussing this more and seeing what Tanzania can get out of it. Clearly this is a place that offers huge advantages already. We cannot take for granted the peace and security that we find here in Tanzania. It is absolutely crucial in these day and times, quite frankly. The infrastructural improvements also that has happened here in Tanzania is a huge advantage. So there are lots of benefits here. The centrality of the country and how useful it can play a role. It's also of huge benefit. So there are lots of pluses. But let's see if this is something that the country sees in its long-term future as beneficial.
Thank you so much. Indeed, Tanzania is in a very strategic place that can benefit other countries.
And something I was going to add is, I think countries like Tanzania really do have a case to say we should have more presence of these global development institutions here. Because when we're talking about development now, the bulk of the global work that we're doing actually centered in Africa. A significant amount of it is in Africa. And I think Africa has a claim to say that there should be more representation of these institutions in Africa. UNDP, UNFPA, even the political centers, I think there's an argument to be made. Of course, member states will have to agree on that. But there is an argument to be made because a lot of the work is actually happening on this continent. And I think, but more thinking as a continent, as East Africa, on what benefit can be derived from this and then pursuing it.
Thank you so much. Dr. Hildebrand, do you have anything that you want to add on that?
Well, I don't have much to say, only that we need to plan and not to rush into things hoping to be like a manna from heaven. There is a planning which needs to go hand in hand with the international standards, value, and having started to build that infrastructure that can accommodate, because the opportunities are many. And as she said, this is the right time to start debating. And our people, or our voters, I will call them voters or citizens, to be able to understand and see the opportunities. Because once you have these bigger level opportunities, there's a lot trickle-down effects that goes even to someone who is located 100 miles away from the city, because it's part of the chain in one way or another. So we need to keep on debating, keep on educating each other, keep on exploring these opportunities and making our leaders to understand if we take this route, we are likely to benefit as a region, as a country, as a continent, because it is true. There was a time these institutions were being seen as if it belongs to them. But now
it's ours.
It's ours. Now, to be part of ours, we need to have a good representation, because that's the only way we can have ownership for our people, for our development, and for the future of this world.
Thank you so much, Dr. Hildebrand. Now to sum up, Susan, can you tell us, Kenya was already part of the headquarters. For the other countries, what is the process? What does it take in just 1 minute for them to become host countries? For the other countries that are not part of the headquarters, let's say Tanzania.
I think it will have to be a General Assembly decision.
Okay.
Exactly.
Do they have to apply, or do they have to lobby, or
well, you have to make I'm assuming, you have to make a case. I think I'm assuming, if one wanted to make a case that, say Tanzania or whichever country should be a major location, I think it would help if the AU was in agreement with you. So a number of countries was in agreement that this is a thing, that a case was made on how having the HQ presence here serves the globe, for instance. So you have to make a case. So in Kenya's case, in '96, we had New York and Geneva, then we had Vienna. And then it was, I think, part of it also was agreeing that Africa needed to have an HQ location. And Kenya was that HQ location where we have UNEP and UN Habitat. Their HQs are actually in Kenya. And it was a GA agreement. There was a resolution that said this is also an HQ location. Now, if we want to go to another HQ location, I imagine we would have to follow the same route. Hence, I said earlier, maybe a step would be to try and be a regional presence first. I don't think you have to go through a GA route. that is having a regional, a regional office or something in the country. I think for that, it's simply just making sure that the services are there, the infrastructure is there. It is clear for the entity what advantages they get for being in the country. Is it going to be easier for them to access the various countries that they have to service? Is the infrastructure in place, etc.? And then from there, then maybe building up to being a global HQ location.
Thank you so much for that explanation. Dear TBC1 viewers, if you were watching, the program on air was focused on this week. And today we were discussing about the United Nations move to some African countries like Nairobi, if it is Africa's biggest break or if it is Africa's biggest test. And indeed, in this program, you got to hear that this is indeed a moment of opportunity for the region, and African countries should tackle this opportunity. But first, they should consult the regional unity and actually be able to tap this opportunity. Leading the program, I was your host, Caroline Maleo, and today I was with Susan Gongi-Namondo, the United Nations Resident Coordinator, and I was also with Dr. Hildebrand Shayo, who is an economic analyst. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Dear TVC1 viewers, until next time, bye-bye. I am Caroline Maleo.